All right, so today we are working on your cell interactive notebook, and I'm so excited that we're finally on cells. Yay! I'm so excited. All right, so your first slide is just your intro slide as usual. And if you click on the microscope, it takes you to the Google site. So you'll see here there are these pictures of all the Google sites. All the links on the Google site. And if you click on the second slide, if you click on this microscope, it takes you to the nature of science. We've kind of talked about the nature of science a little bit when we did our science experiment, but this is in more detail. So let's look and see what you need to type into your answers. So the first pillar of science is it is subject to change. New research and technological advancements will continue to help shape our scientific knowledge. Remember when we used to think, you all might not remember, but at one point, Pluto was considered a planet. Remember, we learned that Pluto is no longer a planet, and we had a list of reasons why. Second second pillar, is based on observations. You all did this when you did your experiments at the beginning of the year. So evidence that is based on observation is called empirical evidence. It is empirical observations that can be made with the naked eye, but also can be made with instruments like a microscope or a telescope and all sorts of other devices. Another pillar of science is creativity. Scientists must be able to look at the world and make hypotheses as to why things are happening. Sometimes this requires imagination and innovation. Think about, how do we get all this new technology? Do we use our imagination? Do we innovate in order to get the new technology? Another pillar of science is that it can have bias. So scientists are humans, and all humans have biases or are biased based on their previous knowledge and experiences. Oops. Sometimes you may be looking for something in the data that's not really there. And you may find a pattern, and let's say I really wanted to show that plants grow if you sing to it. But I also watered it every day, and I had good soil, and I fertilized it, but I sung to my plant. You could say that me singing helped make the plant grow. But unless you change something else later on, or another scientist repeats your experiment, then we will not be able to know. But in my biased mind, my beautiful singing made my plant grow. Right? And then the last pillar of science is culture is embedded. Science can be affected by things like politics, economics, religion, and so on and so forth. Any part of your culture can affect how you view science or even how you learn science. And remember, we learned about Galileo. He was punished for the geocentric model. Remember, they all thought that, well, he was punished for the heliocentric model. Sorry about that. Heliocentric model. Because before that, they thought the Earth was the center. But Galileo was like, no, no, no. The sun is the center of the solar system. All right, slide 3, scientific vocabulary. We hear these words all the time of theory and law and fact and hypothesis, but what exactly does that mean? So if you click on the microscope, you scroll down past all the pillars of science, here's a video that you all should watch. Pause the video that you're watching right now of me going over the answers. Watch this video. It is very informational, and that's the reason why it's on the website. So watch this video and it'll help explain it a little bit more. So a theory is a highly supported explanation acquired through repeated scientific tests, observations, and experiments. So in a minute, we're going to be learning about the cell theory. The cell theory, even though it's, a theory, is still It's still shown through science and observations and experiments that it is valid. So a theory does not mean that it's just something that someone thought of. It is backed up by science. A law is a statement based on repeated experimental observations that describes some phenomenon of nature. Okay. A hypothesis is a proposed explanation for a phenomenon made as a starting point to further explanation. So a hypothesis is an explanation for seeing something. And a fact is just observations around the world. I can tell you for a fact that if I drop a pencil or a pen, it's going to fall. That is a fact. We all know that. So please, please, please watch the video that's at the bottom of this slide, of this site. Please watch this. It'll help explain in a lot more detail than I just did what fact, theory, hypothesis, and law all are. Slide number 4 is about the cell theory. You all need to watch the video that is right here, the wacky history of the cell theory. We are not going to be going into too much detail about the scientists right now, but we should later in the year. But these scientists are super important that you know who they are for your SOL test next year. So the 3 main parts of the cell theory, I went ahead and I typed them out down at the bottom of the website. All organisms are composed of one or more cell. So let me see. All organisms are composed of one or more cells. If it is living, it has cells. Next thing, the cell is the basic unit of structure and organization in organisms. So the cell is the basic unit. It is the smallest unit of life. And the third part are all cells come from pre-existing cells. So in order to get cells, they must divide and they come from other cells. And they must do this process by themselves as well. For slide number 5, you click on the microscope, and I'm actually not going to go over this one because you all need to do some things by yourself here. So you're going to watch either this one from, I think it's from Math and Science, Moo Math and Science, there it is, or from this one that's from LSG Science. This one is just history of microscopes. It's like a cartoony version, and this one's not as cartoony, and it gives you some information about Leeuwenhoek and other individuals that helped develop the microscope. And you need to use complete sentences, and you need to have at least 3 of those complete sentences. I'm not going to answer this, and we will be on the lookout for slide 5 to make sure that you summarized in your own words, I'll even type it out here, in your own words. Do not copy from the internet. Use your own words to summarize the video that you watched, and we will know if you copied or not. 6, we are actually starting to go over the organelles. So I'm actually going to put this whole video together from slide 6 down to slide 12, just talking about the different organelles within the cell. As you can see, there's a fun GIF here of 2 dachshunds chasing each other. So the GIF shows what the cell membrane does. The cell membrane surrounds the cell and regulates what goes into and out of the cell. It is called selectively permeable. Selectively permeable. That's what this word is here. Selectively permeable. Define what selectively permeable means. So if you went to the microscope, you click on here, and then you clicked on eukaryotic cell organelles, and you scroll down to the, where is it at? The cell membrane. It tells you what selectively permeable is. It means that it can control what goes in and out of the cell. So it can control what it lets in and out. So if we're comparing this inside of our cells to a city, the cell membrane are the city limits and the guards. So they're the things that help protect the city from things that are coming into and out of the cell. Next slide, slide 7, is the cell wall. I want you all to know that cell walls are not in animal cells. They are in plant cells. Cell walls surround the cell membrane. It is like a fortress wall. So if you're thinking of like a castle, they have like fortresses around them. That is what the cell wall is. It protects the cell and gives it support. So plants, they don't move like animals do typically. So they have a rigid cell wall that is there to help support it and protect it. So plants have cell walls. Plants also have this thing called chloroplast. Some of you may know what a chloroplast is, other of you may not, and that's okay. Chloroplast is where photosynthesis takes place. So it converts light energy into chemical energy. Photo, for those of you that do not know, photo means light. So like a photograph, you need light in order to take a photograph. And synthesis, if you synthesize something, you make something. So literally this word, if you were to break it down, means light makes. That's it. Photosynthesis just means light makes. So you convert light energy into chemical energy through photosynthesis in the chloroplast. The chloroplast is inside of the plant. Inside of a plant. Once again, it's inside of a plant, and it converts light energy into chemical energy. Part of the city that the chloroplast is like is the trees. The trees help make oxygen for the city so that the organisms around the trees can live. The next thing is in all cells. It's called the cytoplasm. It's this like jelly stuff that's inside of the cells, and it holds everything in place. It's kind of like jelly. So you see this GIF here. You have these like little, I guess these are supposed to be fruits and some peas and stuff. They're held in place by that jello. That jello is the cytoplasm. So the inside of your cells have like this gel-like, what is the word I'm looking for? Gel-like material. That's not quite the word, but you get it. That holds everything in place. It's not necessarily an organelle, but it holds the organelles in place. And something to compare it to in the city are like the lawns. So the lawns help hold everything up and in place in the city. If the lawns disappear, you have nothing to hold up your city and hold your city in place. The next thing we have is the endoplasmic reticulum, or the ER. So that word at the top is endoplasmic reticulum, or you can just call it the ER. The ER transports proteins and other materials to other organelles in the cell. So the ER works as your roads and your highways. The rough ER, it's rough, it's bumpy looking. If you go to the website, you can see here's the rough ER. It's got dots on it. The rough ER looks like it's rough, and it has ribosomes. Ribosomes, okay? Ribosomes. Smooth ER has no ribosomes. So once again, the part of the city is the roads and highways. 411, slide 11, is the mitochondria. The mitochondria produces the energy needed for the cells to function. This is your powerhouse. This is your powerhouse. So this is where cellular respiration takes place. We'll learn more about cellular respiration later after holiday. And the part of the cell that the mitochondria is like is the power plant. It makes the energy. It makes the energy, or the ATP, which we'll learn about later in the slides a little bit. ATP is the chemical used in cells to make energy. All right, next one is slide 12, which is the nucleus. The nucleus is normally in the center. It directs all cell activity and controls the size and reproduction. So it has your DNA, it has all the instructions you need for your cell to grow and for your cell to reproduce and split and things like that. An example of this is City Hall. City Hall runs the city. The nucleus runs your cells. All right, not the last, but the last part of talking about specifically cells is going to be the difference between plant cells and animal cells. So, I went ahead and I presented this so we can start looking at these labeled plant and animal cells and thinking and noticing what's different about them. So the first thing off the bat that you may notice is that their shape is very different. The plant cell here, it's square, and the animal cell is a circle. Okay, so that might be something that you notice. And then you might also notice that there's this big thing here. This is called a central vacuole. And then if you look over here in the animal cell, all right, so this graph does not show it, but there should be a little vacuoles all around this cell. They're going to be teeny tiny, about the size of a lysosome, just floating around the cell. And then there's this thing here. It's green. It's called the chloroplast. It is not seen in animal cells. You don't see a chloroplast in the animal cell. And then there is, if you look on the outside here, there's a cell wall outside of a plant cell, a cell wall. Outside of your animal cell, you're not going to see a cell wall. You're only going to see a cell membrane. You're only going to see a cell membrane, okay? So the cell membrane is also inside of the plant cell. It's just inside of your cell wall. So the cell wall in the plant cell surrounds the plant cell. It also surrounds your cell membrane. In animal cells, the cell membrane surrounds the animal cell. So let's go to slide 14. Energy. How do these cells get their energy? So in plant cells, there are chloroplasts that make glucose through photosynthesis. Glucose is just sugar, which is then used in cellular respiration in the mitochondria. Okay? So then chloroplast makes a sugar. The sugar then goes to the mitochondria. In the mitochondria, it makes ATP, which is just a short word for adenosine triphosphate. You don't need to worry about what that is right now. Just know that it's a chemical used as a way to get energy in your cell. This chemical is used in cells to provide energy. So the plant cell has both the chloroplast and mitochondria. Mitochondria. It has mitochondria and chloroplasts. Plant cells have both. Animal cells just have a mitochondria. Okay? Animal cells just have mitochondria. Let's go on to slide 15. Storage. How do these different cells store things? So as you saw on slide 13, the plant cell has a large central vacuole. You need to know what a central vacuole is. This is an important word that you know. Central vacuole. There's typically only one per cell, and it is large and holds a lot more water than animal cells. So I put this question on here. Think about what happens when you don't water a plant enough. What happens to that plant? So, what happens to that plant is the plant starts to wilt or starts to droop or starts to drop down. That's because the central vacuole doesn't have enough water inside of it to help hold the plant up. Now, inside of animal cells, there are vacuoles, plural, and they're little. They're pretty small, and there's a lot of them per cell. And they're very small compared to plant vacuoles. Right. Slide 16 is about the structure, meaning what's on the outside of these cells. Outside of the plant cell, it's rigid because of that cell wall. Remember that the plant cell has both the cell membrane and the cell wall. I'm going to keep repeating this over and over all throughout this unit. Your plant cells, if you are to ever do anything with a plant cell, or if you are asked a question about a plant cell, it has the cell membrane and the cell wall. The cell wall is on the outside, and the cell membrane is on the inside. Okay? And the animal cell is just has a cell membrane and allows materials to flow in and out. And the last slide we have for this section is the shape. What is the shape of these plants? Of these cells. We looked at that at the beginning when we looked at slide 13. You see here that the plant cell is square and the animal cell is round or circular. So the plant cell is square shaped, and this is typically because of the cell wall being so rigid. So it being square shaped means it has a regular shape. It is regularly shaped. You will see this again, I promise. So you need to remember this. I'm going to highlight it and bold it and underline it for you. Round animal cells are typically round shaped, and that's because it just has a cell membrane. It is also known to be called an irregular shape. Animal cells come in all sorts of shapes. They're not all circular. The ones that you will see will be, but typically animal cells, the way your muscle cells look versus your other cells, are vastly different. Last slide for this notebook is diffusion and osmosis. So if you click on the microscope, there are some pictures to help describe it, and then here's a text that you need to read, and then there is a video here, and there's another video here. So diffusion and osmosis. That's how you pronounce these words. Diffusion and osmosis. So what is diffusion? Diffusion is the movement of molecules from an area of higher concentration to an area of lower concentration. So think about you have something cooking in your kitchen, and you walk into your kitchen and then you smell whatever you're cooking. You smell that. And as you get farther away from the kitchen, you smell less and less of whatever you're cooking. Okay? So the movement of those molecules that are in the air that you're smelling is called diffusion. It's moving from your kitchen, where it's a higher concentration, meaning there's more of that smell and those particles, to where there's less of it at a lower concentration. So here you are to label either low or high concentration. So high is where there are more things, and low is where there are less things. That's pretty self-explanatory. And then here you had all of these black dots over here on the side. And what you were to do were to move them so that you created equilibrium. What you might notice about the word equilibrium, I'm going to move these back, the word equilibrium, is that it has the word equal almost in it. See, equilibrium, meaning there needs to be equal parts in both of these. So you had 8 black circles, you needed to put 4 in one and 4 in the other. Now we also talked about osmosis. What is osmosis? What makes it different than diffusion? Osmosis is the diffusion of water in particular. Okay? Osmosis is the diffusion of water. So it is the movement of specifically water from an area of higher concentration to an area of lower concentration. And we're going to talk about that more later on. Just keep that in mind. Osmosis is the diffusion of water. Diffusion means molecules move from an area of higher concentration to an area of lower concentration. All right?